This is the second episode of Aspire PGC's Career Day podcast. My name is Jarrell Ellegood. I'm an educator and creative in Prince George's County, Maryland. Aspire PGC is a vehicle for me to help and support homeschool families in Prince George's County. The idea for the Career Day podcast became a part of that mission when I realized how many schools were not able to facilitate their own career days for a myriad of reasons. Our guest today is one of my best friends, Dr. Terrence Britt, Director of Admission at the University of the District of Columbia. Today's conversation will explore the day-to-day activities of higher education professionals and also provide behind-the-scenes insight into the college admission process for young people and their families. Let's get into it. I want to start each podcast and ask my guests, what is the day in their life like? So for you as the director of undergraduate admission, at the University of District of Columbia, as someone who works in higher education administration, just to start, what is a day in your life like?
A day of my life. It depends on the day. I typically plan out my days with a to-do list, but I work at a very, how can I put this? Our institution is very moving. There are a lot of needs of students. We are a different institution, so we represent the population of DC as a whole. So we have some students from a non-traditional background, students from a traditional background. So the day could look different. What most of my day looks like is going to meetings, and then between those meetings, doing administrative work, making sure the team is okay. There are 15 people under me currently. Making sure that they're not having any issues while they're out on the road recruiting students, evaluating applications. Our systems are working correctly with the processing team, and then also meeting with the vice president to strategize our enrollment funnel and strategic planning of how we're going to meet our target every year, to think strategically about how we're going to meet our goal. Because we are a non-traditional and a commuter university, how can we make that enticing to students coming from a traditional background, let's say from Pennsylvania or New Jersey? So my day looks like going to a bunch of meetings, strategizing, human resources with the team, and problem solving.
Okay, so I know you said a lot of meetings and you mentioned a lot just now, but I guess talk to me as if I was a middle school or maybe a high school student. When you say higher education administration to someone, what does that mean? Because I know what it means. I went to college, but say someone who hasn't gone to college or even an adult who's not really familiar, to them, they may just think of education is teachers in a school and college is professors. And I guess the people who run the college, and I guess your line of work is closer to those who run the college or university. So I guess could you speak a little more to the implications of that, to maybe again, imagining if I'm a high schooler and I'm not really maybe cognizant of what the full scope of higher education administration is.
A lot of people don't know that this is a job. So when I was looking at colleges, I did not foresee this as a job. I knew there were people sitting on the other side that admitted me. Well, I got my letter from that did the campus tour. I went to schools and toured them and saw people working, but it never clicked in my head that this was a career until I actually went to school. What we do on a daily basis is basically run the university. There is a big org structure. So enrollment management, student affairs, faculty affairs, and you have your deans, and you have segmented offices in the organization chart within the actual college. But on the enrollment management, we do all the legwork of getting you interested in the university, telling you why you should come to the university. How can you pay for your education through financial aid and scholarships? We are the ones that are evaluating your application, scoring your application, saying yes or no, or maybe you should be on the wait list. So that is the bulk of our work. And we do this through marketing. So doing things on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube videos. A lot of people are using different apps. There's a social media app called Zeme that is very engaging for students. What other marketing pieces? You'll get a lot of mail in your mailbox when you sign up to take the SAT. Send you a lot of emails. Those emails are not coming to you personally. We're not writing on the other side saying, "Hey, Jarrell, you're interested. We're putting this in a system, and your name is on the list, and it goes to your email address." So that's basically what we do. And we actually buy you technically because we buy your name based off your
Oh
SAT
wow.
score, your ACT score, your location of where you live. We can get all of that data based off of the demographic of the university. So with me working at UDC, I work with a company called MarketView, and what they do is they do a high level marketing intelligence based off the population of students that we represent. So, for example, if I want to increase students in yield at the community college, I know typically those students come from a low impoverished background. So, I will look for students who basically have a family income of $20,000 or less, and I will push marketing out to them of why they should come to UDC. So there we are the basically the thinkers behind the scenes of getting you to come to a university behind those pretty brochures and the admission letters that you get in the mail.
Now you you spoke a lot about marketing just now, and I know a lot of people may not be familiar, or I guess a lot of people are familiar with me being a graphic designer. I did some graphic design for UDC, and that work came to me through you. And I remember when I was working on the project, there were things that I assumed about the design work I was doing for UDC, but it wasn't true because I was thinking about college when I applied to college. So when I was working on like the admissions guide, I was thinking about the implications of it as if I was still, applying to college, thinking about that time, and that was a long time ago. And I remember you had to correct me on things. So could you kind of speak to the differences in the college admissions process in 2024 versus maybe 2005? And I've just dated myself. But versus 2005, because I remember one of the things you said were no paper admissions, or no paper applications is one thing that had gone to the wayside. And I never realized that. I still thought that that was a thing. So could you kind of speak to the differences in a college student going to high school? I'm sorry, a high school student going to college now versus a decade ago.
If paper applications were a thing a decade ago, we have definitely come a long way. But to compare from then until now, one thing will be paper applications. If Office of Admission is using a paper application, please run. I can say that now because my office just got off of them, but please run. One, you're gonna run into a lot of troubles down the enrollment funnel, and our job as enrollment managers is to take as much stress off of you as much as possible. Another thing is all a lot of digital, a lot of email. So back in the day, you would get a lot of stuff in the mail. Like when you signed, even when I was
Mm.
going to college back in 2012, when I signed up for the SAT, you would get a lot of stuff in the mail. A lot of admission office doing on demand admission. We're still doing that. There's a company called Niche that does that, and I'm actually partnering with them myself at my job. But we buy those names and we admit you. We just send a lot. But now everything is happening on the phone because the generation is on the phone. So even with admission letters, we are very rarely mailing out admission letters anymore. It's all to your email or through your admission portal from your application. Orientation is online. There's an online orientation that you have to do now before you actually come to campus for the big orientation.
Oh wow.
Also, another big thing that's digital, we're doing a lot of stuff on Instagram. All the apps that students are using Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. Facebook is not out of the way, but we're still using Facebook to keep the parents involved because they're a part of this equation as well. All of the new technology and apps that the students are using, we're using it to get in front of their faces from a marketing standpoint. We how we are not doing the marketing, but we hire companies to do that for us. There's a company called I have a list right in front of me. We can use Carnegie Dartlet, for example, because I'm writing a marketing proposal. They do a lot of digital ads, so I give them the geographic locations of like, all right, I want 20008 to 20011 in DC. Market this campaign across Instagram, and they'll show that and send that out through Instagram so we can create leads. Or I can work with Ancora to say, hey, I need a commercial to display in Prince George's County because our numbers aren't looking great in Prince George's County. So can you keep flashing this commercial between everything? Believe it or not, Amazon has bought into the higher ed. There's these things called campus tours where they do different series at a university. At my previous institution, they did a 8 segment series based on Catholic University. And students can go on Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, and watch a eight episode series on Catholic University.
Wow.
So that's how admission has changed. Everything is digitized versus in being on paper.
And you mentioned Catholic University, and just to let the audience know, at this time, obviously, you're at the University of District Columbia, but you previously worked at Catholic University, and then prior to that, it was the University of Maryland College Park. And so these are three different institutions. I know that Catholic is private. University of Maryland is public. UDC is also public, correct? And it's also an HBCU. Could you speak to the differences, I think, between the different institutions? And maybe if you want to speak to your own experiences in college, because I know you went to BU, you went to Boston University. So what are some of the differences, I guess, in having this same line of work, but across different institutions?
So by now, I've been at a big private institution. I worked at Boston University. I've been at a big public university at University of Maryland College Park. I've been at a smaller private school at Catholic University, and now I'm at a small mid-sized public institution at University of the District of Columbia. And across all four, the main difference is money and resources. BU I never had an issue at BU. Anything I needed to pay for to get our initiatives done, it was nothing. You take the credit card and you pay for it. Swipe the credit card. It's great. Same thing at Catholic. Catholic has a lot of money, so we were able to swipe the credit card. My old supervisor has a big $1 million budget compared to what I have now at UDC. And that is the big thing with it being an HBCU. UDC is also unique in that it is part of DC government. So not only do we have the politics of being a university, we have the politics of DC government. So our money is controlled by the mayor. We don't have tuition revenue. So tuition revenue is basically if you go to a private institution, the number of students that decide to go to that school, that they are paying X number of dollars, departments get that money is broken up amongst the departments. I don't have that. What I have is the mayor says your UDC is getting this much, and then the president will divvy up that money across the university. So it doesn't matter if I get 5,000 students to enroll versus 20 students to enroll. We're going to get the same amount of money regardless. So that's one of the downfalls of working at a public institution. University of Maryland worked the same way, but they were very strategic. And well, I guess I could say UDC is strategic in how they divide the money up as well. But it was very school-based. So I wasn't in the primary admissions office there. I did recruitment for the College of Journalism. So looking at the school side, how they divide the money up, obviously journalism is a smaller school. So we got the schools that got the least amount of money. We weren't like your business school or your James Clark School of Engineering that got all the money that can do scholarship awarding and pay for all these programs. So we had to be creative. That's one thing that I think has fast-tracked my role to directorship at 29 years old is because I've been in those positions where I had to be creative. And one thing I should know is 3 out of the 4 of my positions were all new. My job at BU is new. My job at University of Maryland, I was the third person to be in the role, but I revamped the role. So they
Wow.
rewrote the job description when I came on board. And this job at UDC is new. So I've always been a builder. So I always came in with nothing. So I guess I had to come in and be creative and build and be a problem solver and go walk in a meeting and think on my feet. So I think that's why I fast tracked my way to where I am now, because anything you throw at me, by the end of the day, I'm gonna have a resolution for you. My team appreciates that now. A lot of them say on a weekly basis, yeah, we talk about something in one staff meeting, you have an update for us, and then by the next Wednesday. So yeah, I think it has taught me to be resourceful, to be creative, and to just work with what I
Okay.
got.
And so obviously you work in higher education administration, but it's not actually what your major was in undergrad. It was voice and music, correct?
Yes. How I ended up here, I tell people all the time the job that I thought I was training for, I was God had a plan for me. I but took me through a different avenue to get there. So the job I thought I was training for, I was still training for my job, if that makes sense. Because when I was at Catholic as a student, my sophomore year, I got hired in the student activities office, and that jump started my career. I would say in higher ed administration, because I was still training for invoice, thinking I was going to be at the Met, traveling the world, singing opera. But as I continued on, like I worked in student activities until I graduated from Catholic, went to BU, still studying opera and voice performance with my master's, working at the student activities office there, working at the School of Music, doing social media for them, and also working at the BU Law School in the student affairs office. And then I graduated, did audition season for a year. Uh, the one year after my first year of grad school, I was like, yeah, this costs too much money to be an opera singer, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna work in higher ed administration. So I was grateful that I had that in the back of my like wheelhouse, because I had by that point I've had 5 years of experience in my under my belt that I was able to walk into a job. And the first job that hired me was Harvard Business School, and then BU hired me though, and I chose to go to BU because it was a new position, and I didn't take the job at Harvard because it's a lot of tradition, and I didn't think I could make change.
So you spoke about, kind of what you expected or where you thought you were headed and how that changed. And I know that you work in higher education administration at this time, but obviously you were into opera on a regular basis when you were, studying it, performing, singing, and when you were an undergrad. So can you kind of talk about, again, if say we're talking to a high school student, just being realistic in terms of how you may have expectations of where your life's going, where your career is going, where you think you're headed, and just how it can be upended. And before you answer, I'll say me. I always thought, oh, I was going to compose music. That was kind of my thing, is writing music. And then I got into design. It was a lot easier to make money doing design, videography, other creative endeavors. And I didn't see that for myself. I kind of said, oh, I was going to be composing music. And now most of my creative work is design. So can you maybe speak to a student, a high school student who maybe they see a vision of themselves and they're so gung ho about it, and they don't realize there's a lot of older people around them who also saw something else for themselves and they had to pivot. And I know that there's people who don't successfully pivot. So can you, I guess, speak to just being open to the idea that you might have to do something else, or you may need to be good at two or three things in life and not just bank on one thing?
I would say it's good to have a vision for yourself. And there's nothing wrong with being so involved and laser focused on one thing. Because I was laser focused on classical music. You couldn't tell me that I wasn't gonna do this and do that. But I would say taking that passion that drive and that vision, because you can create that vision, it actually makes it easier for you to pivot, because you can just take that, all of that. What, because people ask me every day, do you use your degree in music? Yes, I use it on a daily basis. Like when I spoke about earlier, being creative, thinking on my feet, speaking to students. When I'm speaking at an open house, I have to use the vocal technique that I learned in my voice lessons. Being analytical, taking what you did, doing music analysis, help you analyze data, which I do on a daily day to day basis. So all of that, I'm using my degree and those skills I use on a daily basis. And people say, "Oh, music degrees don't matter, art degrees don't matter." It matters because those skills are transferable, and I'm a testament to it. People say, "Oh, you're not gonna make any money
Oh
getting from it."
wow.
Those people in their face today, like I make over six figures now. So it afforded me a great life. So being gung ho on one thing, it is not. There's nothing wrong with it. At the end of the day, people just care about that you, in this day and time, that you have a degree in something, because you've learned something. You learned a skill. You're learning life skills. So you if you learn how to write, everyone has to take English. One of the first things I look for when I'm hiring people, if your resume and cover letter has grammar issues and things of that nature, I'm not looking at the application anymore.
Mm.
Everyone has to know how to write at the end of the day. Are you able to talk to people? Are you a people person? Like those are skills you learn in school while being on the college campus. If you can't be a team player, no one wants you on their team. No one wants to hire you. Can you analyze data? Every major in college has some type of data analysis or something analytical in it. Can you analyze data or have the skills to analyze data? And then make that in storytelling. Storytelling is a big thing. That's why everyone's getting into AI and data science and all that, because if you could take data and tell a story, if you could take data, make a presentation, take data, do graphic design, take data, put a marketing plan in place, take data, put an enrollment plan in place, take data to do research, you have a job. So it doesn't matter what you major in. It's as if you take your major and actually simplify it. I like to live by KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Simplify it, you'll be fine. There are so many transferable skills that you can get from anything. Like they take it from philosophy, history, music, art, media, journalism. Like it's there's just so much. When I was working at the College of Journalism, so many students went on to work at Amazon and Microsoft and went to law school rather than being a journalist.
Oh wow. So you've spoken, you know, really about a lot of the different experiences you've had. It's kind of been positive. I don't want to take things into a negative light, but what is a bad day for someone who works in higher education administration, especially someone who's worked, has experience across multiple different institutions that have different dynamics? Um, what is a situation, and it doesn't have to be maybe something on a day-to-day basis, it could be something over an extended period, that might pose a challenge to someone who works in higher education administration? Because even as someone who's gone to college, I my interaction with the administration at Morgan State was incredibly limited outside of maybe a convocation, or in passing I might see the president walking across campus. But I knew what these people did, but I didn't. I guess my question is, what can go wrong in your line of work? How can that happen? How do you kind of address that? How do you kind of try to fix things when things aren't going the way they should be?
What can go wrong? Everything can go wrong. Things go wrong on a day to day basis.
Oh no.
But no, we're not curing cancer. I tell my team that every day. We are not curing cancer. This is not rocket science. But what's going wrong is what's going on today with the financial aid packaging. The Department of Education has changed how students apply for FAFSA, and it has caused an uproar in college admission work. I'm grateful that I work at UDC and our students are historically late anyway with getting things in, so it's not going to affect us. But if I was still working at one of my prior institutions, it would definitely would, if I was the director there or the VP or the AVP there, it would definitely have me like drinking every day because students cannot make an admission decision without a financial aid package. And May 1 is the national deadline where students have to declare where they're going to college.
Mm.
If that institution has not extended their deadline, so May 1 is 2 weeks away. No, actually, next week.
Yep.
Catholic University, for example, has not extended their May 1 deadline, and their yield is down by 35% to where they were last
Oh
year. So,
wow.
if you're going to go by the May 1 traditional deadline, they're not going to meet their target. So, that is going to cause an issue with the budget. So, the operating budget comes from the number of students. So, remember, I talked about tuition revenue at the beginning. They're projected, let's say they need 900 students for the operating budget to pay salaries, to keep the lights on, to make sure students have food, so they don't have to make budget cuts. If they don't meet that 900 student target, they're going to have to make budget cuts. So what happens is we have no FAFSA, we don't reach the budget, we got to make some very hard decisions. So a place like Catholic will say their target is 900, they will try to like reach for like at least 1050, so that way students can melt during the summer. Summer melt is that students change their minds because these are we're asking 17 and 18-year-olds to make a life decision. So they change their mind. And another problem that we're having in higher ed that didn't happen in 2005, which we spoke earlier, students are double and triple depositing. So they can use Morgan, for example. So say they got accepted to Catholic, Morgan, Howard, GW, and George Mason. These students will deposit at George Mason, Howard, and Morgan because they know they have to meet a deadline and by May 1, and they still don't know where they want to go, and they know they have all summer to think about it still, which leaves the person sitting in my seat thinking, I met my target. Say you had 300 of those students doing that. Oh, I think I met my target. I'm over 300, and you're really not over 300 because those students are going to melt and decide to go somewhere else. So that's
Mm.
why on our hat we do an anti-melt campaign. So we do anti-melt. I had my meeting today with stakeholders around the university where we keep students engaged. So they say they deposited at those three institutions, but they didn't hear from Howard and George Mason all summer. But Morgan was sending them emails, but like, "Hey, Jarrell, don't forget to submit your immunization records. Oh, Jarrell, here's your advisor. Here's a special email video from your dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. To prepare for orientation, come meet the student life team on this Zoom call." This has been happening all summer, and all you've been hearing is Morgan. You forgot all about George Mason and
Mm.
Howard. So you're going to show up at Morgan and Howard. So this is some things that if people who are not sitting in my seat at these different institutions have not started thinking about, it's
Mm.
going to cause an issue for them to meet their target because we're for the past like 5 years, we've all been competing with the same students because graduation rates are lower. There are less people having more babies. So the back from 2005 until now, we don't have that big fish, all these fish in the pond to choose from. It's more competitive in the marketplace. It's funny if you go to a college fair, you will see all these schools in one room and then all these families, and you think like there's not enough fish in the sea for all of us. So you just have to be very strategic. And that's why engaging with companies, I mentioned a company called Market View earlier, engaging with those companies, someone who's actually taking your enrollment data and just doing that high level intelligence, like to let you know, these are your people that are going to yield highly. So they take our data based off of their social economic background, their address, if their parents have degrees and things of that nature, and they grade them. So every week I send my team the grading. Anyone who has a 50% or above, these are the students we should be calling and emailing and contacting because they're going to yield higher than someone who lives in Ward 3 in DC who both of their parents went to college. Their parents are probably lawyers and doctors. They have a family income of $200,000. They're not thinking about us, although they apply. So we're not going to waste our time. We're not going to have a return on investment. So this is all the strategic thinking that's happening behind. And sorry, I just went off on a
No, you're
tangent and
fine. You're
forgot what the
fine.
original question was.
And I actually, just so people know, and I'll say Dr. Britt. I won't say Terrence or TJ, even though this is one of my best friends. I'll say Dr. Britt because he worked for his title. I wanted to ask about, I wanted you actually to speak on going back to high school students specifically. I remember we had a debate. I don't want to say argument, but we had a very spirited discussion about the efficacy of ACT, SAT testing. Because I think I told you I had listened to a podcast on, I think, NPR, and they were talking about a lot of schools not really, I don't want to say not accepting it, but they kind of dismissed testing. And I think I told you that schools like MIT actually still use it. And so there's like this divide. Some schools are kind of moving away from the ACT, SAT, others are not. So if you're in high school and say you are in a household where you potentially would be the first person in your household and maybe even your family and your lineage to go to college, to enter in higher education, if you are presented with conflicting viewpoints on, oh, SAT, ACT is important, or other people saying, oh, it's not a big deal, just, get good grades or whatever. Like, what's a tidbit or maybe some advice you could give on that? Because I remember our discussion was, like I said, spirited, but what could you speak to that? Because I know I do know parents, their kids in high school, and if they were to ask me, I would say, oh, just take the SAT, try to do well. But I know, again, that there are schools that don't really care for it. So what is the situation on that? Because when I was in school, it was a big deal. It was a very big deal. The SAT, anyways. I didn't take the ACT. I took the SAT. But it seems nowadays it's kind of not as, it's not viewed as essential as it once was. Could you maybe enlighten us on that, especially for us older folks who obviously we've already been to college, so we don't maybe realize that these standardized tests that were once a big thing may not be as prominent or as important as they once were?
Um, these tests do not matter. And this is my, as an enrollment manager, these tests do not matter. They do not show us any indication of you being successful in college. This is why we remove them from our practice in higher ed. There are a lot of schools who are thinking about implementing the testing back into their evaluation process. You
Okay.
have there are two. One thing parents have to understand is there's two things. There's test optional and there's test free. Test optional is you can submit a test score, but please be cognizant and know that that test score is going to be used in evaluation. So a lot of students opt out, and I tell students all the time, if you do not have an upper level score close to perfect, and especially depending on the type of school you're applying to, don't submit it because it's going to hurt you rather than help you. Then
Wow.
there's test free. There are some schools like Catholic University that I worked at that don't even allow you to submit a test score on the application. You can't submit a test score to Catholic because they're test free. Some schools, some hired, some Ivy Leagues, and some really competitive schools, and we have to think about affirmative action. Are thinking about implementing their test scores back into their admission practice. So there are a lot of competitive schools that are thinking about putting it back into their practice because they can do so. They don't have to. For example, Harvard, if they go back to using the test score, it's not going to affect their enrollment because it's Harvard. People are going to apply to Harvard and people are going to yield at Harvard. But you take a smaller liberal arts school like a Catholic university or where else can I say, a Goucher college, they can't make a really bold move like that because they're not in a position to, because now students feel entitled because we have moved in this direction for so long. They're like, so why would I waste my time and take this test for this school and they're not like that high? So you have to, the people who sit and strategize, they have to be very, very aware about the type of school that they're representing and if they actually want students to come to their university. I myself, I did horribly on the SAT. I got like math and reading and writing combined. I probably got like a 13, 20 or whatever, but I got a 25 on. I got a 25 on the ACT because the SAT tests what you can learn. That's why students are able to go and get a coach and teach them how to take the test. The ACT test what you've learned. It's an achievement test. It tests what you've learned from kindergarten to 12th grade. So that's why students of color typically perform well because they can put into practice what they learned in the classroom. Not what is gonna, they're able to take a test on what's coming before them in college. Like, that makes no sense.
If a student is going to take one of the tests, would you recommend one over the other if they are
I
going to do
would
one?
definitely recommend, I would definitely recommend the ACT over the SAT.
And and so what about if you spoke, I guess, to African American students? I have a lot of Latino students that I've met. Would you suggest the same
Same
for
thing.
them? Okay,
Yes.
that's interesting because
So
I never realized that.
that's what's happening with testing. You'll see some schools pop up and say, "Yeah, we're gonna go back," but not too many schools are gonna go back to it. So as I said before, it doesn't matter. Don't waste your money and don't waste your time taking it.
We ended our this is our second episode. We ended our first episode with a final word, kind of just an uplifting motivational word just to students in general. Before we get to that, I just want to ask if you could speak directly to PG County students, Prince George's County students in Maryland. Maybe as someone again who works in higher education administration, what is maybe a thing that they should be doing, no questions asked, when it comes to procuring a future for themselves in college and a university? Is there something maybe across the board, or just maybe something really important that would matter to a lot of them that you could think of? Or maybe something that when you, as a higher education administrator, you see an application, maybe you see an application and it's just top tier, and then there's this one thing that they're missing, and maybe that's a thing, I don't know, a lot of applications are missing. I'm just throwing things out there. Just, is there anything you could speak to in terms of advice to young people who, if their future that they foresee for themselves involves universities and colleges, what's something that they may want to consider, just from your perspective?
You can no longer just you can no longer just go to school and get straight A's. Those days are
Whoa.
long gone. Everyone, especially if you go to what school can I use? I always use Prince George's County, University of Maryland. We've known historically in PG County, a lot of students do choose to not apply to University of Maryland because it's hard to get into. Getting straight A's to go to school now is like you're not gonna get a full scholarship. Those because everyone has straight A's, everyone has a high GPA, everyone's taking the AP, the IB. But one thing that people have in Prince George's County at these high schools, you have specialized programs. You have the science and tech, you have the VPA, you have the cosmetology, you have the IT part in that makes you different than everyone else. Then also your community. Your community plays a big part now. Like people are really like when people are reading applications, they're really looking at what have you done in your community. What leadership things have you done in your community, not just in school but outside of school. So basically being a student is now basically a full-time job. If you want to get into one of those high-ranking institutions, it's basically being a full-time job. You can come to UDC. We take the 4.0s. We love you. You also get some money at UDC. You get a nice scholarship. So don't deter from UDC. But if you're looking to apply for other institutions, you definitely need to ramp up your resume. Being involved, you can't just go to school and get straight A's and think you're gonna get to school because there's nothing impactful that's gonna move that admission team. And if so, you're not gonna get much scholarship money. So, to give you a little bit of background on how people read applications, and admission offices get thousands and thousands upon thousands of applications. They're not really taking all that time to read your applications. If I'm training a team, I will tell them at least you should be spending at least 5 minutes on the application. That's getting through your demographic data. That's getting through your essay, your letters of recommendation. If you submitted test scores, your test scores. Some schools recalculate your transcript. So at a place like Catholic, we recalculated transcripts. So that happened outside. So but they still have to take the time to recalculate your transcript. So looking at all of that should take 5 minutes. So they're really not reading the essay. So you need to like there's really just scrolling up and down. So you really need to like put your best foot forward within those first few sentences. Like this is why I'm amazing. This is why you should admit me. Yeah, just package yourself the best way possible, but just be you. Being you is the best selling piece. And also get to know who your admission counselors are. They're listed on the website for a reason. They're the ones reading your application. Uh, for example, at our open house, a student came up to me. He was like, "Oh, Dr. Britt, you admitted me," and I'm like, "I did. My name is just it's just on the letter. I didn't admit you. The counselors admitted you." Um, so you get to know who your admission counselor is because they are the ones
Hmm.
advocating for you. The director is not advocating for you. The it's the counselors. They are reading your your application. Some schools do 2 round readings. My institution, we just do 1 round. The counselor just makes a decision. There are some schools where your actual counselor reads the application, then they'll do a second read by someone else on the team to make sure they're not being like showing favoritism or anything.
Hmm.
If both parties agree, and then there's some schools who do a third read, third round. But if all parties agree that yes, you are clear, admit you're admitted. But say one of those parties is like your counselor says yes, admit. The other counselor says no. You're going to committee. So at committee, this is when your counselor is going to bat for you. Think about it as you're going to court. They're your lawyer. They have to be prepared to. It's literally like court. They bring up a file and they'll be like, "Oh, Terrence, that's your student." And I have to advocate for the student why they should be in committee, why they should be admitted. But look, although they got a D in math their sophomore year, but look, they had an upward trend junior and senior year. But they're only majoring in communications, so they really don't need math. So that's okay. Their English grade is up. They got A's and B's all 4 years. This is what's happening in admission committee. So that's basically your lawyer. So this is why I say putting your best foot forward because there are multiple people looking at it, but your admission counselor at the end of the day is the person that is gonna go to bat for you. So if you have a relationship with them, you could probably have a pretty favorable admission experience.
So, before you get your final word, I have a question because I have never. I mean, I guess I assumed something like this committee stuff happened at some juncture, but um, this is the first time I've ever heard anyone, kind of speak to it directly. So, in terms of something going to committee, how common is that? Is that something that's maybe half of universities, most universities? Is it more the selective ones? Obviously, I went to Morgan State. I don't think my application went to committee, but how often does that occur from your experience? And you could speak to just your direct experience or in
Every
general.
office In practice, every office should have a mission committee. And I'm an honest person. My office doesn't have an admission committee because based off our admission policy, with
Okay.
us, if you have a 2.5 or better, you are admitted to the Van Ness campus. Our practice is right now currently until it starts changing. Our if you have a 2.5 below a 2.5, you're going to the community college. So there's no need for an admission committee. We are instituting a committee for our readmit students though, so that will be an admission committee. But in some shape or form, there needs to be an admission committee at every institution. And I will probably say that maybe at all. I can't speak for every university. I have not worked at all of them, but I know for the ones I've worked at, they have an admission committee. If it's a whether it's a faculty committee or as a admission counselors committee, there's a committee. It's a real thing because you can't admit everyone. And that's why it's having multiple readers of the application is to say that we're being ethical and we're being fair in our practice. So say I'm the admission counselor. I have a great connection with all these students, and I'm an advocate for Black and Brown students going to college. I'm just gonna admit all my Black and Brown students, but I know goodness well that they should not be admitted. So I have somebody else having doing checks and balances to make sure everything's okay.
Mm.
But when you do present a committee, you need to have a solid case of why they need to be a part of the university. And I've seen in some cases, through my experience, when there's a tie, so everyone votes at committee. So everyone who's on admission staff, they vote. So at the end, after you present your case, who the dean or the director or the VP will be say all in favor of admitting. Everyone who wants to admit will raise their hand. Everyone who's in favor of denying will raise their hand. If there's a tie, the enrollment manager in the room, the senior leader in the room will break the tie. So they have the final say.
That's interesting. One thing that I stress to people is that college and university is not for everyone. I think that we all have different journeys in life. We all have different routes that we're taking. We all have different experiences. We all have different tragedies and traumas that have befallen us. And so, is there maybe a final word that you could give? And it could be just for folks in general, if you want it directed towards the folks who are specifically looking towards, entering a university or institution of higher learning. I guess just your final spiel today.
College isn't for everyone, but higher learning is for everyone. We like to say at UDC, we have something for everybody. You can start in our workforce development center. So these are for those students who know I'm not going to college. It's not my thing. I don't like school, but you can get a trade. There are students who I want to go to college, but going to a 4-year institution is not my thing right now. I need to start at community college. And then we have our students going straight to college. But higher learning is for everyone. You can go get a trade. You can go to a trade school. The UDC is not the only workforce development center in the DMV area. There are a lot of them that you can go get a trade at. You can go get a certificate. There are a lot of online programs. Amazon has one that you can do higher learning, and you can get an entry-level job in IT and things of that nature. So there's other higher level things you can do that does not equal college. Therefore, you should be doing your work in high school or in middle school or whatever level of school you're in, because it all matters at the end of the day. Because even if you just go to the Army, you still have to take an entrance exam to get into the Army. So you don't want to go to college and you know you can make good money being in the Army. There's still a test that's gatekeeping you from getting into the Army. So you just got to do what you got to do in school.
So I definitely appreciate you joining us today, Dr. Britt. I appreciate your time. And I definitely would like to open the door, if it's on your heart, for scholars that I come across, if they want to reach out to you for information about UDC or maybe just college admissions in general. I think you're definitely a source of information, definitely a beacon of light for people who may be wavering on whether or not they should go to college or not. And the last point you said, where you said higher education is for everyone, I've never heard anyone say that before. I think that was, like I said, definitely a profound statement. And I appreciate your time today.